I'm Cavin Elizabeth, an international wedding photographer based in San Diego, and today I'm going to be giving you guys my top 5 mistakes that couples make when it comes to their wedding photography. Now, if you are somebody who doesn't really care about your photography that much, it's not of value to you, this video probably isn't going to be your best thing to watch. But for those of you who really care about photography, you think it's one of your most important things, this is definitely a video for you, something that you should watch and take to heart. Now, if you have done some of these things that I say are mistakes, really they're more like things that I recommend not doing. Some of them are more mistakes than others and can kind of badly affect your photography, but don't feel bad if you've done any of these. Don't feel ashamed. This video is not to make anybody feel bad. It's more to help you guys understand the top 5 things that couples do that really aren't so great for their photography. So to jump right into this video, I wanted to let you guys know that the first mistake that I see couples making is that they wait too late to start reaching out to photographers. So I have couples reach out to me often 2 or 3 months in advance, and usually I'm already booked. And that happens to be the case with a lot of wedding photographers. Most photographers in California at least tend to book out maybe 6 to 9, sometimes 12 months in advance. For other parts of the country, it's a little bit further in advance, so maybe more like 1 to 1.5 years. It's kind of different all over, but for the most part, if you are waiting until just a few months before your wedding date, the chances that you are going to find enough photographers to have options to speak with and kind of make sure you get the best fit, they're really not going to be available like they would have been a year ago. I do have a decent number of couples who reach out to me before they have a venue, before they have a date, and for me that's really hard to kind of deal with, because if I don't know their date, it's just really complicated. And if they book me but they still don't have their date, then they have to make sure whatever date they pick is a date that I have open, and it's a lot of back and forth. So I would say please wait until you have a date and venue solidified, or at least you have a date and you're in the process of booking that venue to formally reach out to photographers, because it's just not as good if things aren't solidified. If things are more up in the air, it's more complicated. Some photographers won't even have a phone call with you until you have your date really firm and nailed. So that's just one thing I would say, but other than that, it's really never too early. The worst a photographer is going to say is, sorry, I'm not taking bookings for that year yet. For me, for example, I tend not to take on many weddings that are more than 1.5 years out, just because I don't know how things are going to be at that point. My pricing is definitely going to be going up before then, so it's just a little bit too far out for me, but I know photographers who will take bookings up to 2 years in advance. So it really just depends, but you're really never too early for the most part. Now, the second thing I see couples doing is that when they inquire with photographers through email or through their contact forms, they don't leave any information. So I will often get couples who will put in their contact form on my website their date, which is required, and then they might not even put their actual venue. They might just put a city, or they might put like TBD, and then the message field is blank. And I don't really know what to do with that. I have to go back to their email and I have to ask them a bunch of additional questions, because they didn't give me any information that I need in order to give them the appropriate information on my end. So for example, my pricing is different for San Diego weddings versus LA weddings, because that's quite a lot of travel. I usually have to stay the night to make sure I'm not late. So for me, if a couple just reaches out and they don't put their venue or anything in that email, I have to ask them. I have to go back and say, well, what is your city? What is your venue? I have to ask them all these additional questions. So it just creates more work for me and more work for the couple, and we can't just get right down to business from the get-go. Also, I will say that as photographers, it is so much more exciting when we receive an email that says something about our work. So if the couple says, oh my gosh, hey Cavin, I love your work so much. I really hope you're available for our date. Like, I can't wait to connect with you. That to me is so much more exciting, and I'm a lot more interested in that couple than a couple who just sends me an inquiry and the only thing the message says is, please send pricing. And I get a few of those, and to me, it kind of says that they're not as serious about me, that they're not as interested in my work, and that might not be the case, but just right off the bat, I'm so much more enthusiastic about the couples who very clearly want to work with me. They have paid attention to my work. I can tell that they've been thorough reviewing my website. So that's just something that is more of a personal thing. So when you guys are inquiring, at the very least, make sure you give your photographers and any other vendors the vital information they need. So your date, your wedding city, your wedding venue, if you have two venues, so if you have a ceremony venue that's separate from the reception, anything that's really important and crucial to the day that they are going to need in order to give you the right information. So that's just something that's very necessary, and a lot of couples forget to do it. It just creates so much back and forth in the emailing, and it could really just be cut out if couples just had some sort of template and then they personalized it after they pasted that template in, so that we know the information we need to connect with them the right way. Now, the third mistake is honestly probably one of the largest mistakes that couples make when it comes to their photography. Now, this is a little bit of a complicated issue for some people, and I will talk about that towards the end of this bit, but basically, couples who do not use the same photographer for their engagement session and their wedding are making a really big mistake. They're doing themselves a disservice for the wedding day. And you might be wondering, why does it matter? Isn't the engagement session just about getting photos? We don't really have to have it by the same person. And I'm going to tell you guys that the engagement session is way more than just getting photos. It is also very much about connecting with your wedding day photographer, getting to know them so that you feel a lot more comfortable and trusting of them, so that on your wedding day when they show up, they feel more like a friend and they're not somebody you're just meeting or working with for the first time. So the benefits of having the same photographer for both is that you know how they work. If they ask you to do something that might seem a little crazy, you already know from the engagement session it's going to turn out to be something beautiful. You also already have that rapport with them, so you just instantly feel more at ease with them. So when you're getting your dress on, it doesn't quite feel so much of an intrusion. It's just like another person you know in the room. So for me, I find it very, very helpful for my couples that have had engagement sessions with me. The wedding day feels completely different. Every now and then I will have a couple where it's just impossible to have an engagement session, maybe because they're located in a different state and they're not coming back here for whatever reason. That is definitely a different dynamic. It's not to say their photos are going to be bad, but I do notice a huge difference in the way that we interact together and with their comfort levels. It takes them much longer to get comfortable and relax in front of my camera, much longer to get the poses that I give them correctly, and just to get in the feel of things. So I find it to be incredibly helpful to have the same photographer for both sets of photos. It's really going to do you a great benefit, and it also really helps the photographer out. For when I'm taking my couple's photos during the engagement session, it helps me learn who they are. It helps me learn how they interact together and what looks good on them and what doesn't look good. It also helps me learn their bad habits. So I know that from this session I've just done, Joe Schmo always does weird things with his faces, so I have to remember on the wedding day to look out for that. I also let my second photographer know to look out for it. So if he is always arching his neck back and that's not a good look, I know to tell my team, hey, make sure when you're posing Joe that he has his chin forward and down and it's just a better look. So these are the kinds of things that I learn about my couples during the engagement session so that we can just work faster on the wedding day to really get it right, to get those best possible photos. Now, for those of you who are perhaps hiring a photographer from another city, you're not going to see them beforehand. I still urge you to maybe find a way to get it done. So you can pay the photographer a little bit extra. I know for me, if I have couples who live just a few states over, it's actually really easy for me to do the same day flight. So I fly out there in the early afternoon, the couple picks me up, I shoot them, then they drop me off at the airport and I fly back home same day. That's usually only going to cost them the cost of my flight. So it's really not a big deal for me. I love having that opportunity. So I'm really flexible to travel where my couples are willing to go. If my couples live much further and they're willing to pay me to travel, that's great too. Sometimes my couples will be coming to my wedding city because that's where they're getting married, but they don't live here. So oftentimes we'll make sure to schedule their engagement session when they're back in town for a catering tasting or a venue walkthrough or whatever it may be. We really try to find that time to get to know each other during that engagement session and make sure we make it happen. Now, the last thing I want to say is if you're really, really saying, I don't have time to get my photographer to do it, there is one last option you do have, and it is really something that doesn't seem like it would work, but it really does. So if you're not somebody who absolutely has to have dozens of photos ahead of time for save the dates, whatever it may be, if you can just get somebody to take a really nice photo of you for your save the date or forgo photos on your save the date, then something you might be able to do is actually have your photographer do your engagement session the day before your wedding. Now, I typically recommend in those cases a sunrise session because it's earlier in the day. You don't have a lot of stuff going on. Your rehearsal dinner isn't going on. If you're going to be in town even earlier, do it 2 days before the wedding. So I have had a couple do their engagement session the day before their wedding, and it worked out really great. So it was just a great opportunity for us to get to know each other before the wedding. And I know I've had a lot to say about this number, but this is the thing that I am most passionate about with my couples. I actually really will not even take on clients if they are only reaching out for engagement sessions, because I don't want to take that experience away from whoever shoots their wedding. Every now and then I will make exceptions, but I just find it really, really vital to have the same person for both. And I love when I get that opportunity with my clients, and I appreciate that they haven't already hired some random photographer or friend to do their engagement photos before they hire me, because that's just always complicated. So again, use the same person for both. There are ways to make it happen, even if it's very last minute. It is still so unbelievably helpful, and you will really thank me later. Now, my fourth tip has to do with more along the lines of budget for photographers. So everybody needs to have a budget or a budget range that they are comfortable with. But more often than not, the biggest wedding regret that I see, whether it's from friends talking about it or people on Reddit or another online forum, is that they went too cheap on their wedding photographers and their photos weren't very good, or their photos were not what they wanted them to be, or their photographer just went AWOL, never heard from them again. That is so tragic, and it really is so terrible, but I will just say that you get what you pay for most of the time. Now, photographers cost very, very, very different prices. I've seen photographers work for free, and I know there are photographers who are charging $35,000 per wedding. Those are like the top of the top, like the best in the world, and that's just a very dramatic example range, but I will say if you meet a photographer that you are just head over heels with, but they're a little bit outside your price range, I say that it is absolutely worth seeing if you can reallocate funds in your budget, or seeing where you can save money in order to get that photographer that you really want, because no one wants to feel like they've settled, and no one wants the worry in their minds about whether or not the photographer that they ended up going with just because they were cheaper, that they didn't like as much as the other photographer. You don't want to have to worry about if those photos aren't going to be as good, or they're not going to be the photos you're dreaming of. So I really recommend just really splurging on your photographer. That's not to say if your budget is $4,000 that you should be trying to get that $8,000 photographer. There are some price points that are just too much of a jump, but if your photographer is within, I would say, even $1,000 or a couple $100s, it is worth trying to see if you can make it work, if that is somebody that you really want to have, and you would feel really sad if you didn't get to work with them. So that's just a great tip from me. I know that's a really tricky subject because some people are on much tighter budgets, but if there's any wiggle room whatsoever, I think it's worth splurging for that photographer who you know will give you not only the most beautiful photos that you could imagine, but also the peace of mind that you don't have to worry about what those photos are going to turn out like, and you know you're going to love them for the rest of your life. Now, I actually have a great blog post I've written, which I will link down below in the description box, on ways that you can save money in order to hire your dream photographer. It's got lots of great little easy to do tips in there, things that really won't be missed or things that aren't a really big deal, lots of different options at different price saving points. So you guys can definitely give that a read if you are currently struggling to book that photographer of your dreams. My last tip is definitely one of the most important, probably just as important as my third tip of having the same photographer for all your photos, but this tip is more just in general that if you hire somebody, you should trust them. If you don't trust this person enough to freely let them do their job and have their creative freedom and just to take their advice, so if they tell you something, hey, this isn't going to really be the greatest for your photos, you need to trust them. If you're not trusting this person, don't hire them. That is just the number one thing. You have to have somebody on your wedding day that you wholeheartedly trust. Otherwise, you're probably going to end up being frustrated over suggestions they give you, or you're not going to think think that something they're suggesting is going to be a good idea when really they're the experts. They know what works and what does not work. So for example, if my bride shows me a photo of the room she's going to get ready in the morning of the wedding and I see it and I think it is just a really bad room, way too dark, is not going to give us what we need, the decor is awful, I'm going to tell my couples, I'm going to say, hey, I really don't think this is a great idea. If we do it here, which we can if you want, just know that your photos are going to be much darker. They're not going to be light, bright, and airy like the style that you hired me for. If you're okay with that, that's fine. It's not my place to tell you what you truly need to do. All I can tell my couples is things to educate them and tell them what consequences of certain things are going to be. And thankfully, my couples trust me and they want the best for their photos. So because of that kind of connection right there, if I suggest something to them, more often than not, they're going to do it because they know that I have their best interest at heart and that I'm going to help them along the way, ensure that we really get the best set of photos that they could imagine. So that's just a really great tip. Trust your photographer. If they tell you to lightly jog on the beach during your engagement session, go for it. It's going to look great. We always have a vision in our minds, and sometimes the couples might not see that vision because we see something that other people don't, but we know the potential that a certain pose or a certain location or concept has. And so when our couples trust us, so if we say jump, they say how high, then those couples are really going to get the most out of their photos because they know we know what we're doing. They know that we're going to give them really great images and a very fantastic experience. So the more you trust your photographer, the better. Understand that they are looking out for you. They want you to have the best. They want the best things to work with your wedding to ensure that you get a gorgeous gallery of images. So just trust your photographer. It's just something that's great to do. And again, if you're not really trusting your photographer, you need to reevaluate if you should hire them. If you've already hired them, you need to maybe have a little bit of a chat with them, tell them what's going on with you, why you're not trusting the things they're saying, and maybe they can kind of explain things to you from their side. But that's just something to keep in mind. So I find that the relationship I have with a couple is really vital to the success of my work. Other photographers might not care whatsoever about that. So you just need to find a photographer that fits what you're going for and has what you're looking for and that you connect with, because the more you connect with your photographer, the better you will feel with them on your wedding day, because they will be with you for probably around 8 hours, almost straight. So it definitely helps to be really comfortable with them and really like them and enjoy their company. But if you guys did enjoy this video, definitely be sure to leave a like. And if you have any requests for future videos, definitely leave them down in the comment box below and be sure to subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye!